Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, 𝗥𝗲𝘆 𝗣𝗀. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations.
Episode 315. She's got no personality. As we've just come through the event, supposedly celebrating the popular but increasingly fake International Women's Day, I thought now would be a good time to let rip about how female introverts can be perceived. Before I do, though, let me explain why I said fake IWD celebrations. Some years ago, a marketing company hijacked the original United Nations ideas, bought the domain and twisted it into something entirely different. They commercialised this day for their own gain. It all began back in 1911, inspired by the suffragettes and campaigners for women's rights. The UN then officially recognised it back in 1977 and have a yearly theme. This year it was Rights, Justice, Action for all women and girls. And I'm an advocate for all of that. The marketeers, though, chose the theme Give to Gain, stating that when we give, we gain. I have no problem with reciprocity in principle, but as a theme for IWD? I mean, like women don't give enough already? Are you ruddy kidding me? So being the cage rattler that I am, and unapologetically so, I chose not to support the marketeers' glossy version of IWD, yet I stand firm with the United Nations mission. So with rights, justice, action in mind, during this episode I'll talk about why it's time to push back on the overtly misogynistic opinions of introverted women. It's been a while since anyone has said to me that I don't have a personality, nearly 20 years to my knowledge. Back then I was called both dull as ditchwater and dull as... Nice, huh? And once I could brush off. Twice had me beginning to internalise it. What is it they say? No smoke without fire? So I was obviously smouldering, but apparently not in the right way. Has anyone ever said something similar to or about you? I really hope not, but if they have, my intention here is to resource us to handle it assertively rather than accept it blindly. Not so long ago, I heard a senior manager say that one of the quieter members of his team had no personality. Dick never was a person more appropriately named in that moment, I felt. Dick said this to me during a corridor conversation. Because I like to think the best of people, I chose to believe that his comment was not meant maliciously. But as I explored what he meant as we continued along the corridor, I began to doubt my choice. You see, phrases like, she's got no personality, slip out casually, carelessly, without thought or consideration, a bit like a silent but deadly fart in an elevator. And oh, don't we know the impact they can have? They may slip out unintentionally, but take your breath away and lands like a punch to the gut. Not dissimilar to careless words, and thinking about that even today infuriates a part of me that I didn't know had been affected. You see, those of us who notice, who hear the comment, even if it was said about someone else, are reminded that being one of the quieter ones is still seen as a weakness. Because comments like that do not stay in corridors or behind closed doors. They travel and shape perceptions, which subconsciously influences who is seen as promotable, who is labelled lacking presence, and who very likely gets left behind, essentially written off. But it raises a single question for me. What does having a personality even mean to those who find us wanting and think it's okay to label us? Well, I asked a few people without giving the context, and here are some of the responses. Having a personality means someone is funny, quick-witted, sarcastic even. I love it when they entertain me effortlessly and make me laugh about anything, can tell a great joke, all of which helps the time pass quickly and lightly. They can talk about anything with enthusiasm and at the drop of a hat. So let me see if I have this right. Comedians and entertainers have personalities, the rest of us nothing, zilch, nada. Well, how effing rude. If I'm employed by you to do great work, which, in my opinion, is the primary reason why any of us should be employed, where in my job spec does it say stand-up comic? I can tell you where. Nowhere. And yet we quieter ones are judged against that standard without it ever having been mentioned. Do I sound miffed? Yep. And it's because I blooming well am. Talk about setting people up to fail. Will humour explain away missed deadlines and failed client communication? Will laughter cut it when productivity is down and job cuts or pay freezes are being considered? Will sarcasm win when we're around the negotiation table? I think what miffs me the most is the haste with which those in privileged positions of authority feel they can jump to judge another because of difference. And let's be clear, everyone, and I do mean everyone, has a personality, their own personality. It may not measure up to your standards, it may not meet some secret expected norm, and it may feel very different to your own, but that doesn't mean they have no personality. It is in fact baffling to me that anyone would think otherwise. Which rock have they been living under? No, seriously. How do we begin to think about personality in ways that are recognised by psychologists rather than the dicks of this world? Many of us will have heard about the Big Five model, which grew from how personality differences are coded in our everyday language, and this ultimately boiled down to 5 clusters. Number 1, openness, including our adventurousness, intellect, emotionality and imagination. Number 2, conscientiousness, which includes self-discipline, self-belief and motivation, and a sense of obligation. Number 3, extroversion, which no surprise includes gregariousness, friendliness, and a few other factors that I will happily challenge. Number 4, agreeableness, including trust, morality, altruism, and modesty. And number 5, neuroticism, which, as you might expect, includes anxiety, hostility, depression, and self-consciousness. Psychologists who use these will then assess people as being high or low on each of these clusters. But here's one thing a psychologist will never do. They will never assess someone as having no personality. But don't be surprised if you hear it, as I did, from an ill-informed leader who lacks emotional intelligence and then tries to pass it off as a joke. But this is no joke, not even close. As with any model or framework, there are critics of the Big Five, so we'd be wise to consider them as a starting point to understand personality differences, not a box to fit people into. Any of these types of assessment are a bit like viewing a 2D map to get your bearings, which is so very different from experiencing the 3D terrain once we're on the journey. That said, if I were building a team from scratch, I'd like to think that what I'd be looking for would depend on the role, not my individual bias or preferences. And yet, I know I'd probably opt for someone with a lower level of neuroticism unless I knew I had the time to support them, and I'd opt for someone with a higher level of conscientiousness. I think we can all agree that we're living through the mess created by leaders and their posse with low to no conscientiousness right now. But remember, these 5 facets are just starting points, and thankfully most recruiters I work with are now much more likely to recruit for attitude and train for skills. All of this begs the question, what are we to do if and when someone judges us or someone we know as having no personality? I know what doesn't work, and that's to get defensive or take it to heart. It's simply someone's perception of us, someone who has not taken the time to see what lurks beneath the surface. The reality is, because we introverts are not so outgoing, we don't parade the depth of our personalities around like it's a beauty contest. So it makes sense for us to have some strategies up our sleeves. Firstly, I think we need to be ready to handle that comment by developing our own understanding of our personality. And because so many corporates use the Big Five, that's not a bad place to start. I'd suggest taking one of the free quizzes, but having tried a few, I can tell you that they are too restrictive and simply not nuanced enough. So, some honest self-reflection and talking it through with a trusted colleague or friend is the better way, I believe. The easy one for us is that we're going to be on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to extroversion. But few of us will be entirely introverted. So what type of introvert are you? Taking the questionnaire at yourintroverttype.com will help with that. What about openness? How open are you to new experiences, to use your creative skills, to be curious rather than judgmental? And how can you articulate those aspects of your personality positively and in a way that leaders, managers, or colleagues will understand? Then conscientiousness. There seems to be an undeniable link to emotional intelligence with this one, as it refers to emotional regulation and thoughtfulness of the empathic kind. And to what extent are you goal-oriented with attention to detail? Next, agreeableness. This one can be a double-edged sword when it comes to individual and team effectiveness. Too low on this scale may point to overly competitive, whilst too high may point to people-pleasing and a lack of boundaries. This may be a case for a Goldilocks score being ideal. Not too much, not too little, just right. I maintain it's clearly a case of knowing your strengths and development areas rather than presenting yourself as neutral, though. Finally, neuroticism. I'm not sure anyone would offer this as a high-scoring trait at interview. There is a warning sign, as higher tendencies here point to higher stress levels and lower resilience. Not insurmountable, but I would certainly want to ensure they had adequate support, either from me or other skilled helpers. So that would be my first step, that reflective assessment, so I can articulate more about my personality. But that does open up another deeper question for me. Does it really matter, and should I even care? I have borrowed Byron Katie's phrase, "What other people think of me is none of my business," ever since I attended a conference she was speaking at many years ago. She also said, "I care, but I don't mind," and that sits very well with me. And whilst my question is sort of in that region, I think my curiosity is more about, what do I think of me? Do I value who I am and what I contribute? That can be difficult when you're constantly told to be different. Not to mention the exhaustion of fending off the constant reminders that we need to be different. These days, I resist really strongly being pushed into a corner to agree to drop who I am authentically and become somebody I'm really not. So knowing what type of introvert we are and being able to articulate our strengths, natural talents and personality traits effectively is essential in my opinion. I see it as having our feet firmly in our reality and building ourselves from the ground up authentically. I say this often, and I'll say it again for those at the back or in the corner. We are not weird, we are wired differently. It's how we are neurodiverse. As I draw this episode to a close, I chuckle when I think of someone trying to tell me these days that I had no personality. I'd probably just reply with, "You're welcome to your opinion, and thankfully others experience me differently." I'll do my best not to sound snippy with that, but it can be a bit of a challenge. You see, we introverts possess remarkable personalities that are more than surface deep. It's true we don't put bunting on our personality traits and wave them in people's faces whilst blowing a vuvuzela, but it doesn't mean they are non-existent, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Remember this: when you need someone to do the deep thinking rather than jump to conclusions, to research thoroughly rather than scratch the surface, and to listen in order to assimilate ideas effectively, nab yourself an introvert who knows who they are and what they bring to the table. They'll be only too happy to showcase their talents in their quietly impactful way. If you lead or manage a team, create the conditions where that depth is recognised, utilised and valued. Otherwise, it's not your team members who are short of personality, it's you who is short on perspective.
If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.